We often see the outbreak of war as a sudden, isolated explosion of aggression, a single event that shatters a peaceful world. But the reality is usually buried under decades of calculated moves. For over 30 years, Ukraine has occupied a dangerous position, a mokra, or pawn, caught in a permanent staring contest between the NATO alliance and Russia. Looking at the geography, the stakes become obvious. Ukraine acts as a massive physical buffer zone, the final piece of land separating Russian territory from the military power of Western Europe. It's also an economic artery. Historically, 30% of all the natural gas Europe used to heat its homes and power its factories flowed directly from Russia through this exact network of pipelines. Because Ukraine was the pivot point for both regional security and the energy market, any shift in its political alignment threatened to destabilize the entire continental balance of power. From the Kremlin's perspective, this isn't just about land. It's about a deep-seated paranoia regarding the encroaching presence of Western military alliances. Since the Cold War, NATO has ballooned from 11 members to 30. Nations in Eastern Europe joined the bloc, narrowing the distance to the Russian border. If Ukraine joins, it opens a 3,000-kilometer border where American missiles could strike the Russian capital in minutes. This fear led to Russia's core demand, the forced demilitarization of Ukraine, to ensure the country could never host Western bases or weapons. Through this lens, the invasion is framed not as a random expansion, but as a calculated, if extreme, maneuver to secure Russia's borders by force. But the conflict also fed on fractures within Ukraine itself. The country was never the political or cultural monolith the headlines often suggest. Demographic data shows a stark internal divide. The eastern regions, including Crimea and the Donbass, hold massive Russian-speaking populations with historical ties to Moscow, while the West has long pushed for European integration. This tension broke in 2014, when the pro-Russian president rejected a deal with the European Union. He was violently ousted by mass protests, marking an irreversible turn in the nation's history. Russia immediately exploited this chaos by annexing Crimea and funding armed separatists in the east, effectively ensuring that Ukraine would remain too unstable to ever meet the requirements for NATO membership. These internal political fractures provided the perfect opening for global superpowers to step in and pull the country apart. The strategy from the West has been equally calculated. The goal for the US and NATO is to contain and weaken Russian power, without ever being drawn into a direct hot war between nuclear powers. They encouraged Ukraine's turn away from Moscow, but they intentionally stopped short of granting the actual NATO membership that would legally guarantee military protection. This creates a situation where the West can supply an endless stream of advanced weaponry to intentionally bleed the Russian economy and military, all while maintaining a safe distance from the actual fighting. It's a strategy we've seen before. Major powers often support local allies only until it becomes politically or economically inconvenient, as illustrated by the chaotic withdrawal from Afghanistan. While this strategy successfully strains a geopolitical rival, the actual cost is measured in the total destruction of Ukrainian infrastructure and lives. This dynamic is why massive democracies like India have refused to follow the Western lead in condemning Russia, despite immense diplomatic pressure from Washington. For non-aligned nations, the primary driver of foreign policy is a calculation of which alliances provide the most reliable security and energy for their own people. India remembers a different history. In the past, Ukraine consistently voted against Indian interests at the UN, opposing India's nuclear testing program at Pokhran and its position on Kashmir. While Ukraine was supplying weapons to Pakistan, Russia was acting as a decades-long military and strategic partner to New Delhi. From India's perspective, maintaining neutrality is a necessary tactic to avoid forcing Russia into a permanent alliance with China and Pakistan. When the shooting starts, the nations watching from the sidelines rarely move toward the fire. A country quickly learns that promises of support are not the same thing as active defense. This blueprint for conflict is highly repeatable. Other contested regions, like Taiwan, could just as easily become the next focal point where superpowers test their limits through a surrogate. Eventually, the leaders will meet to sign treaties and shake hands, but for the people left behind in decimated cities and broken families, the damage will never be undone.
If you value clarity over chaos, explore more on Clear Lens X.